Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McMillan.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stuart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, actually good morning. The first item of business this morning is general questions, and at question number 1 I call Fergus Ewing.
Presiding Officer, to ask the Scottish Government, in light of reports that gulls can cause serious human injury, whether it will direct Nature Scot to issue licences to control the birds and help prevent such injuries.
Minister Jim Fairley.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I absolutely recognise the significant impact that urban gull populations are being felt in some of our towns and cities. Now, I met with Nature Scot yesterday on the back of my meeting with Mr Ewing and Mr Ross last week, and they have agreed that they will consider an area-wide gull licences to deal with the immediate concerns of the upcoming nesting season for potential health and safety reasons, but it is mindful of our conservation obligations. There is a vital role for local authorities to play in this, dealing with local communities, working with building owners and businesses to reduce the appeal of urban areas as nest sites or for feeding zones, because I'm quite sure we've all seen plenty of people standing at the side of a pier throwing chips out, which only encourages more gulls to come in. As a result of that, I will therefore chair a summit later this year that brings together the key partners to put measures in place to prevent measures in place now to prevent these issues from arising again next year.
Ewing.
Well, Nature Scot have been considering it forever, Presiding Officer, and all too often in Scotland, where there is a serious injury or death, which could and should have been avoided, we have a public inquiry, often costing millions of pounds, followed by a report to ministers who will say, we must learn lessons from this. Well, Presiding Officer, would it not be better to have taken the necessary action to prevent the injury or death ever occurring where that risk is clear, direct and foreseeable, as in this case? And given the risk of injury, of serious injury and death, will the Minister now take the necessary action with the Section 11 order under the Natural Heritage Scotland Act 1991 before it is too late?
Minister.
Thank you again, Presiding Officer. I very much recognise the points that Mr Ewing has made, but as I set out a moment ago, to reduce the risk of health and safety concerns of gulls, Nature Scot will be considering an area-wide gull licence to deal with the immediate concerns of the upcoming nesting season for the potential health and safety reasons. And I understand that there is an issue around what the potential issues are that Mr Ewing has highlighted, and I have made that very clear to Nature Scot. But gull numbers are in decline, and the longer-term solution cannot be further population reductions where mitigation action can be taken. And that requires collective action. So we will work together through a summit that I will hold later this year with key partners, including local authorities, to ensure that appropriate measures are in place ahead of next year's breeding season.
Douglas Ross.
Presiding Officer, I agree with everything Fergus Ewing has said and the issues around people being injured, because it is happening on a daily or weekly basis. Yet just this morning I received a Freedom of Information response from Nature Scott when I had asked how many injuries they had recorded by gull attacks in each of the last 5 years, and they have said in their response that they do not hold that information. So how can they be taking decisions on these licences when they don't know the impact? And I've also put this to the Minister before. They are refusing licences at the moment for reasons such as businesses could give customers umbrellas to protect themselves by walking in and out, and they won't be attacked by gulls if they've got umbrellas. Does he agree that that is utter madness and Nature Scott have to treat this as a serious issue?
Minister.
As I said, I spoke to Mr Ross and Mr Ewing last week. I have raised these points with Nature Scott. We have come to the conclusion that there will be actions taken this year in order to make sure that we deal with the immediate problem of this year, but there will be a summit that will allow us to make sure we take the appropriate action to preserve the status of the gulls, but at the same time make sure we can live beside them.
Question number 2, Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, President. Also to ask the Scottish Government what dialogue it has had with NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde regarding shared care agreements for adults with private ADHD and autism diagnosis.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Thank you, President Officer. My officials were in communication with NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde regarding shared care agreements for adults with private ADHD and autism diagnoses in November. Colleagues in NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde provided their policy and their approach to private diagnosis. Additionally, the Director of Mental Health wrote to the Chief Executives of all health boards in March with a baseline survey of neurodevelopmental assessment and support for adults available locally. This included a question on protocol when approached by an adult with a private diagnosis that wishes for this to be ratified by the NHS.
Stuart McMillan.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that reply, and it has been repeatedly raised with my office and myself that adults in my constituency feel like they have no other option than to pursue a private ADHD or autism diagnosis in instances where they are given a diagnosis and are prescribed medication. Trying to get an NHS shared care agreement in place is the next challenge, and for many this can result in huge financial bills which they risk not being able to afford if the NHS doesn't take on their treatment. So can the Cabinet Secretary therefore advise what additional work is to take place to ensure that the criteria for NHS shared care agreements is made clear to patients, and that the process for assessing whether a private diagnosis meets NHS standards is carried out at pace?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. I thank Stuart McMillan for raising this on behalf of his constituents, who I absolutely sympathise and empathise with. There has been an increased awareness of neurodevelopmental and divergent issues for adults, which has seen a growing demand upon services, and that poses challenges that we're seeking to respond to. Some NHS boards may have shared care policies, but it remains at the clinical discretion of each individual GP to decide the best course of action for their patients. A recommendation from a private specialist for a particular medicine does not entitle the patient to NHS prescriptions for that medicine. However, the National Autism Implementation Team published guidance on prescribing ADHD medication to adults following a private sector diagnosis in Scotland in April 2022. This guidance is available to practitioners and to patients, and officials are engaging with the Royal College of GPs here in Scotland to understand more about what could be done to ameliorate the situation of private diagnosis of ADHD and voluntary agreements.
Brief supplementary, Willie Rennie.
The system is wholly inadequate, and it's very short-sighted because the demand is huge now for private diagnosis because the NHS system is inadequate. This will just put further pressure on the NHS if they have to go back to the start of the system again. So either we improve ADHD services or we allow shared care arrangements. We cannot cut it off in the way that's been done so far because many, many patients are losing out as a result.
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Willie Rennie for that question, and I think, like him, I recognise, as I did in answer to Stuart McMillan, the with increased awareness has come a massively increased demand upon services. And I obviously want the NHS to be able to respond to that, which is why we are working with the likes of the Royal College of GPs, as I set out to Stuart McMillan, but also the publication of the guidance from the National Autism Implementation Team to make sure that we're doing exactly as Willie Rennie asks of us.
Thank you. Question number 3, Rhoda Grant.
To ask the Scottish Government what assessment has been done of any impact on CAMHS waiting time targets in light of reports of autism assessment services being cancelled, leaving more children in distress and unable to access support that requires a diagnosis.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. CAMHS waiting time statistics capture children who meet the CAMHS criteria. Children who require autism or other neurodevelopmental support are not reported in these statistics unless they have a comorbid mental health condition. Our focus should be on improving support regardless of a formal diagnosis, and the neurodevelopmental specification places an expectation on the NHS and local authority children's services to work together to provide support to meet a child's needs when they need it, and this should not be dependent on a formal diagnosis.
Rhoda Grant.
There are 1,537 children in NHS Highland area waiting for a neurodevelopmental assessment, with more unable to get onto the waiting list at all. What is the Scottish Government doing to ensure that young people receive the assessment in a timely fashion? How are they dealing with the knock-on impact of child and adolescent mental health services? And what assistance are they putting in place in school for these children that are stuck on assessment waiting lists, given the reduction in additional support needs staff?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you. As I said, there are different elements at play here. One is those children that will meet CAMHS criteria. That may include children with neurodevelopmental conditions and the direct intervention that's required around supporting children with neurodevelopmental conditions. As I said in my initial answer, should not be dependent upon a diagnosis in order for that support to be in place, regardless of the setting that we're talking about, whether it's education or other elements. However, we are supporting and directly allocating £123.5 million to NHS boards and IGBs for a new enhanced mental health outcomes framework. The framework provides a single, flexible funding stream to support continued improvements and better outcomes across a range of mental health and psychological services, including neurodevelopmental services. We've also granted £250,000 to fund a range of individual projects to improve neurodevelopmental support for children and young people, including the use of digital tools for assessment. And we've provided councils with £65 million since 2020 to develop and further deliver community-based mental health support for children and young people.
Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the figures that last month showed that the national standard on waiting times for children and young people accessing mental health services has been met. And the Cabinet Secretary has just given a comprehensive answer about the work going on. So I'm interested to hear from the Cabinet Secretary, how will the Government continue to ensure progress continues for children and young people across Scotland, including in Dumfries and Galloway?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, President Officer. I thank Emma Harper for recognising what is a significant milestone, that 90.6% of children and young people started treatment in CAMHS within 18 weeks of referral. I'm incredibly grateful to the dedicated CAMHS staff who play a critical role in achieving this. We've allocated £123.5 million to NHS boards and IJBs in 24-25 to support the improvements and better outcomes across mental health services, including CAMHS and neurodevelopmental services, and we will continue to work closely with boards to ensure that this progress continues so that we can sustain that significant milestone having been reached and ensure all children and young people can access the support that they need.
Question number 4, Clare Haughey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I remind Chamber I hold an NHS contract with Greater Glasgow and Clyde. To ask the Scottish Government how it is supporting the uptake of childhood immunisations in NHS Lanarkshire.
Minister Jenny Minto.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Childhood immunisation rates across NHS Lanarkshire continue to be amongst the highest in Scotland, reflecting the hard work and commitment of our colleagues in the NHS. Vaccination remains one of the most important public health interventions, but we have seen decreases in uptake compared with previous years in Scotland as well as globally. We are working with Public Health Scotland and health boards to improve uptake, address health inequalities and support those eligible for vaccinations. I urge parents and carers of young children to bring them for vaccination when invited to give them the best protection against serious disease.
Clare Haughey.
I thank the Minister for that answer, and it's reassuring that childhood vaccination rates remain high in Scotland, particularly as we know that perceived minor illness that these vaccinations protect against can cause disabilities or even fatalities. However, misinformation and conspiracy theories have become all too commonplace in relation to vaccinations, often fuelled by social media. Can the Minister advise what the Scottish Government is doing to tackle this issue and ensure parents and carers have the correct and factual information that they require to protect their children's health?
Minister.
I thank Ms Haughey for her supplementary question, and she does raise a very important issue. The Scottish Government is aware of this serious problem and is currently seeking to understand the nature of how false and misleading information affects the health outcomes of Scotland's people, leaning heavily on international best practice and the latest academic research. NHS Inform and supporting immunisation materials are frequently reviewed and updated for accuracy, ensuring that the public can access the latest available information on vaccinations.
Carol Mockin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Recent Public Health Scotland figures found that just 2 in 5 high-risk infants were vaccinated against flu in the past winter. This means that more than 1,000 were left unprotected. We also know that the decline in childhood immunisation levels continued in 2024, with uptake lowest in the most deprived and rural areas. Can I ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to investigate why this is and what it is doing to address the causes of low uptake in particular?
Minister.
I thank Carol Mockin for her question and agree that work needs to be done with regard to ensuring that vaccination are available across all areas, which they are, but ensure that that uptake is high as well. So as a result, we are currently working with digital colleagues who have developed a system which will provide greater granularity of data so we can understand where the areas of real need are, and working then with health boards to ensure that these areas are targeted.
Thank you. Question number 5 has been withdrawn. Question number 6, Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it is encouraging the growth of community energy projects.
Cabinet Secretary Gillian Martin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. At the end of December 2024, there was an estimated 1,109 megawatts of community and locally owned renewable energy operational in Scotland, and we're committed to growing this sector even further and have recently announced £3.5 million in community and renewable energy Scotland funding for projects in 2025-26, building on the success of last year's £1.5 million pilot fund, which supported 23 projects. We've also announced £1 million for community capacity building and secured £4.85 million through the local power plan, which will primarily support community energy projects in Scotland, and further details on this funding will be announced shortly.
Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you. Thank the Cabinet Secretary for the answer. Community energy projects are key for our journey to net zero and putting money back in local economies. Last year, Edinburgh Community Solar Cooperative saved the Council £1 million in energy costs and its members money on their bills. In light of this, will the Cabinet Secretary join me in welcoming the £5 million investment from GB Energy into community energy in Scotland? Will she provide further details on how this investment will be delivered to projects like Edinburgh Community Solar Cooperative?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think Mr Chowdhury has just exemplified how important it is to have projects like this, because they're actually having meaningful differences in communities, and there's an awful lot more work that can be done. One of my first meetings that I had with the incoming UK government was in the early days of setting up GB Energy. I don't even think they had the CEO in place at that point, but I made the point to Minister Shanks that when it came to any money for community energy, it was best not to reinvent the wheel or clutter the landscape when we've already got a very well respected and known vehicle for delivering funding in the CARES community and Renewable Energy Scotland. I urged him to look at that and to actually give money from GB Energy straight into that rather than setting up anything up new. I'm very pleased to say that he did look at it. He realised how well respected they were, and we were able to secure that money. So we'll work together to increase the capacity of CARES, but also to deliver more projects of the sort that Mr Chowdhury's just mentioned.
Thank you. Question number 7, Douglas Lumsden.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on when it will publish the outcome of the latest A96 corridor review.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
During the roundtable meeting for MSPs I held in Parliament on the 4th of February, which the member attended, I said that it is my intention to provide an update on the public's response to the consultation as soon as possible. I also said it will depend on the time required to review the considerable number of responses received, and I will also need to appraise Cabinet colleagues of it. The 12-week consultation period ended on the 21st of February. It received over 1,400 responses, which are currently being collated and analysed before publishing as soon as possible.
Douglas Lumsden.
Well, that's a disappointing answer, because the latest consultation on dualling of the A96 closed over 2 months ago. And in that time, we have witnessed around a dozen separate collisions on the A96, 3 of which were fatal and 1 involved an ambulance. Presiding Officer, we need urgent action. And appallingly, almost £6.5 million of taxpayers' money has been spent on both of the Scottish Government's reviews since 2022. Failure to fully dual the A96 will be Fiona Hislop's lasting legacy to the people of the North East. So can the Cabinet Secretary set out a timetable of when the results of the consultation will be published, and when this SNP government will finally dual the A96 in full, which was promised more than a decade ago?
Cabinet Secretary.
The public response is important. That will be published as soon as possible. And I can inform the Chamber that the Scottish Government took title to the land for the Inverness to Nairn, including Nairn bypass land, for the purpose of starting the dualling of the A96.
Thank you. That concludes general questions. And before we move to First Minister's question time, I invite members to join me in welcoming to the gallery the Honourable Marie Edwards, Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, Parliament of Victoria. The next item of business is First Minister's questions, and at question number 1, I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The SNP's policy of gender self-ID has now been ruled to be unlawful by our highest court. SNP politicians, including Nicola Sturgeon and John Swinney, were willing to trash women's rights while pushing their dangerous and divisive ideology. Common sense and a basic respect for biological truth have now prevailed thanks to the incredible Scottish women who would not whisht. The SNP's fringe obsession has cost obscene amounts of taxpayers' money and wasted huge amounts of government time while public services were neglected. Politicians have a duty to hold up their hands and admit their mistakes. So will John Swinney finally apologise to the women of Scotland?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government accepts the judgment of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled that women in the Equality Act 2010 is defined by biological sex, and the Government accepts that ruling. I also accept that the Court emphasised that this decision does not reduce trans people's protections from discrimination, whether or not they have a gender recognition certificate. The Equality Act expressly prohibits discrimination and harassment against trans people, and it's not necessary to have a GRC in order to be protected. I believe the vast majority of people in Scotland want to live in a country that is respectful, compassionate and caring, and I'm committed to protecting the rights of all, and that will guide all of my actions as First Minister.
Russell Finlay.
For John Swinney, it seems that sorry really is the hardest word to say. And we know why, because he's not sorry. The SNP still believes in gender self-ID. 2 months ago, John Swinney said that he accepts that trans women are women. Yesterday, he dodged the same question and he said there will be plenty of opportunities for that. Well, here's his opportunity. Are trans women women. The court ruling makes this clear, and as a result, Scotland's public bodies must now abandon SNP gender policies and respect the rule of law. For the country to move on and for trust to be rebuilt, it's important for the government to accept accountability and to own its mistakes. So will John Swinney at least now admit that he got this so very wrong?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, as the Supreme Court judgment narrates, there is a complex reconciliation of two pieces of legislation that the Scottish Government is obliged to work within. And those are the Gender Recognition Act 2004 and the Equality Act 2010. Now, I remind Russell Finlay that on two occasions, the Scottish Government's legislation that was passed in 2018, which was the subject of the legal challenge, was supported by decisions taken in courts in Scotland. Now, that was not the case in the Supreme Court judgment, and I accept unreservedly the Supreme Court judgment. As Mr Finlay knows, I am a believer in the rule of law. Therefore, the Government will take the steps. As the Social Justice Secretary set out to Parliament on Tuesday to make sure that all of the regulatory changes that are required to be made in the light of the decision of the Supreme Court are made, and we will draw, as we did on the previous guidance, on the input of the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, as the Government is obliged to do, given they are the regulators of the Equality Act 2010.
Russell Finlay.
We spent years telling the SNP to drop this nonsense and get back to the day job. They refused to listen. They were absolutely obsessed. Now John Swinney doesn't want to talk about it because mainstream Scotland has turned against him. And the harms caused by gender self-ID are real. Female prisoners were the first target of SNP gender ideology. And today, a prison officer told me that staff still face disciplinary action if they call male sex offenders identifying as female he or him. Now, following the scandal of a rapist in a women's prison, there are still male prisoners in the female estate, and that's despite last week's seismic court ruling. So will John Swinney now instruct the Scottish Prison Service to ensure male prisoners do their time in men's prisons?
First Minister.
As the Government has set out to Parliament already, we are considering the details of the Supreme Court judgment, taking the necessary advice from the Equalities and Human Rights Commission about the application of that advice, and that will have a bearing on the judgments that are made in relation to public services. And I will expect, as is I think well established in our politics and our discourse, all public bodies, including the Scottish Prison Service, to operate on that basis and within the law.
Russell Finlay.
That's just a typically weak and evasive response. The SNP's focus on radical gender ideology hasn't just impacted in prisons, it has damaged trust in politics. It showed Holyrood had lost the plot and Nicola Sturgeon was detached from reality. John Swinney has got a chance to be his own man and go a different way from his closest ally, who isn't even showing up at work anymore. He could guarantee all public bodies will have new and lawful policies to respect women's rights in place by summer. He could be honest and admit that trans women are not women. He could hold his hands up and apologise fully and sincerely. John Swinney could ditch Nicola Sturgeon's toxic legacy once and for all. Will he now take the chance to finally bring to the end the era of divisive gender politics?
First Minister.
President, so in one of Mr Finlay's earlier questions, he said to me the Conservatives had been warning about all of this for years. I want to read to Parliament the comments made by Alison Harris, who was a member of the Scottish Parliament for the Conservatives in the last Parliament, on Tuesday the 30th of January 2018.
Members.
And from the official report to Parliament, Alison Harris said this: "As a member of the Equalities and Human Rights Committee, Annie Wells was pleased to see positive changes being made at Stage 2 to the Gender Representation on Public Boards Scotland Bill. In particular, she was pleased to see the committee agree to Mary Fee's Amendment 10, which sought to broaden the definition of woman so that the legislation should be inclusive as possible, recognising that not all trans women possess...
Members!
Recognising that not all trans women possess a gender recognition certificate. I simply read that into the official report to show that the...
Members, I'm very keen that as many members are able to take part in this session as possible, and if we could ensure that we could hear one another, that would be helpful.
I'm simply reading that into the official report because the Conservatives have changed their position on this, and they have changed their position from what they said in 2018. What my government will do, Presiding Officer, is my government will do what it always does: follow the rule of law, take careful account of the decisions and the context in which we take our decisions, and act wisely to protect the rights of all within Scotland, because the first duty of the government is to protect the rights of everyone in Scottish society.
Thank you. Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, yesterday I joined political leaders, faith leaders and charities at the Summit Against Polarisation and Disenfranchisement. And as I warned at the summit, this cannot look like some kind of Scottish establishment talking to itself, distant from the realities facing Scots. But as I feared, what was missing was any reflection on SNP government failure and how that drives people to divisive politics. So why does John Swinney not recognise that to tackle division and polarisation, we need a Scottish government that actually delivers for the people?
First Minister.
Well, that's what the people of Scotland have got, because in a whole variety of different areas, this government is delivering for the people of Scotland. Families in Scotland benefit from having 1,140 hours of early learning and childcare for all 3- and 4-year-olds and for eligible 2-year-olds. We have a rising investment in our housing sector, tackling the housing emergency, building on the fact that we have built more affordable houses per head of population than in other parts of the United Kingdom. We have low unemployment in Scotland today, and we have progress been made in reducing waiting lists and waiting times in the National Health Service. And crucially, on the issue that absolutely matters to me, we in Scotland are seeing falls in child poverty when they are rising in the rest of the United Kingdom. And I fear that the progress we're making in Scotland is going to be damaged by the welfare reforms of the United Kingdom's Labour government.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, that complacency is part of the problem and proves John Swinney does not get it. The measure for success for the Scottish Government is how it uses its power to improve the lives of Scots. For 18 years, John Swinney and the SNP have been in charge of our NHS, but we have 1 in 6 Scots on a waiting list. For 18 years, John Swinney and the SNP have been in charge of housing, but we have 10,000 children with nowhere to call home. For 18 years, John Swinney and the SNP have been in charge of keeping Scots safe, but we have gang violence on our streets and blades being taken into primary schools. The gulf between the SNP government's rhetoric and the reality faced by people across our country could not be starker. So can't John Swinney see that he and his party's failures have made them the architects of divisive politics in Scotland?
First Minister.
Well, Presiding Officer, I will set out to Parliament frequently the record of this government upon which I am very proud to stand. We are giving young people in their families the best start in life by the most extensive early learning and childcare offer in the United Kingdom. On housing, we've delivered 47% more affordable homes per head of population than in England, and 73% more than in Wales, where the Labour Party has been in power for even longer than we have been in power. In Scotland, on waiting times, we promised 75,000 NHS surgeries would be, 64,000 NHS procedures would be delivered in a 12-month period, and 75,500 have been delivered extra in the period to January 2025. So this government is focused on eradicating child poverty, improving our public services, achieving net zero and boosting the economy. That's what this government is about, and that's what we're delivering for the people of Scotland day in and day out.
Anna Sarwar.
John Swinney's head is in the sand, and it proves why he can't be the person to lead the fight against disenfranchisement and polarisation of our politics, because he simply doesn't get it. Record long waiting lists and record levels of homelessness amongst our children on John Swinney and the SNP's watch. After nearly 2 decades in power, if the SNP had a plan to improve the lives of Scots, then we'd have seen it by now. And research from Carnegie UK has revealed that 63% of Scots feel they can't influence decisions in Scotland, and 40% of Scots have low trust in MSPs. And is it any wonder? From ferries that don't sail to astronomical levels of waste of public money, this SNP government deliver nothing and tell Scots to be happy about it. Because the fact is the SNP government has lost its way and is out of steam, and they're responsible for divisive politics in our country, so they can't be the ones to sort it. So isn't the truth that we will only tackle division and disengagement if we have a Scottish government that actually serves the people of Scotland, and the only way to deliver that is to remove the SNP from power?
First Minister.
Well, let's take a moment to see how the last change of government process went in the United Kingdom. And last summer, the Labour government was elected on a commitment to end austerity, to deliver change. And what have the Labour government done? The Labour government have delivered a continuation of austerity.
Let's hear one another.
A continuation of austerity. And I can't, I cannot believe the Labour Party is comfortable with the fact that their United Kingdom government is going to deliver welfare reforms that will increase poverty levels in the United Kingdom. Now, I invite Parliament to think about that point for just one moment. A Labour government has come into office and poverty is going to rise. That demonstrates there is no point in the Labour Party, because Labour deliver poverty and austerity to the people of Scotland when this SNP government is reducing child poverty in this country. I'll take that to the country and be proud of our record.
Question number 3, Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. After 4 years of asking, I've finally got the message. I'm pretty sure I know when the Cabinet is next going to meet. Thanks to Jamie Green's principled defection to the Liberal Democrats, I need never trouble the First Minister with that question ever again. Presiding Officer, there is a crisis in teacher training. Over the last 3 years, the Scottish Government has aimed to recruit 750 maths teachers, to train 750 maths teachers. In reality, it has missed that target by a country mile, training only a third of the maths teachers that Scotland needs. So can I ask the First Minister, what is going wrong?
First Minister.
First of all, can I say that I'm glad I've been relieved of the burden of trying to remember when the Cabinet meets on a weekly basis. So, I welcome Jamie Green to his position on the Liberal Democrat benches. I'm not at all surprised to see him over there. He looked decidedly uncomfortable over there for an awful long time, like many others, I dare say. Listen. I'm very happy about it all. I'm very happy about it all. In relation,
let's hear one another.
In relation to the substantive point, that Mr. Cole-Hamilton puts to me. There are challenges in the recruitment of teachers to particular specialisms, and the Government has acknowledged that in the steps that we have taken forward with, for example, the Teaching Bursary Scheme, which provides a 20,000 bursary to career changers, which is particularly aimed at individuals who aspired to be maths teachers, to recognise if they were leaving jobs in perhaps other sectors to go into teaching, we had to provide a mechanism to enable them to do so. So those mechanisms have been available. The Government provides over £186 million to support the recruitment and retention of teachers to ensure that we reach 2023 levels in our local authority employment of teachers. So the Government is working in partnership with local authorities to ensure that we can achieve that objective.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Presiding Officer, it's clearly not working, and whilst that was a predictably managerial reply from the First Minister, this is our kids we're talking about. This is about their futures. Where is the hunger? Where is the passion to resolve this? And it's not just maths. It's not just maths. Chemistry, physics, biology, each of them hundreds of trainee teachers short. And the Government says there's an economic urgency to address our digital skills shortage, yet it is only training 16 computing teachers this year. 16 for the whole of Scotland. We need homegrown skills if we're going to lead in industries like renewables, AI, defence, precision medicine. In this volatile world, amid the economic firestorm of the Trump presidency, Scotland's people are our biggest asset. But how are we going to compete if our schools can't teach these subjects properly because they just don't have the teachers?
First Minister.
I agree with Mr Cole-Hamilton about the economic challenges that we face as a consequence of the decisions of the Trump administration and the volatility that has flown from that. That's why I gathered together a range of stakeholders during the Easter recess to ensure that the Government is well sighted on the issues that have been faced by individual sectors as a consequence of these unwelcome changes in international trading arrangements which generate a great deal of volatility. What we will do is, in relation to the points on education, is work with our local authority partners to increase teacher numbers. We gave that was one of the central commitments in the budget process that we negotiated with our local authority colleagues. The Government has delivered its side of the bargain in relation to financial support to local authorities, and I look to local authorities to recruit. There is, of course, cooperation through the Strategic Board for Teacher Education, which explores all the issues about recruitment and addresses some of the challenges, which is where the bursary scheme came from as a consequence of practical endeavour by the Government to address these issues. So I assure Mr Cole-Hamilton there is no lack of energy within Government to ensure that our schools are well supported with the recruitment of teachers to meet the needs of children and young people in Scotland today.
Question number 4, Christine Graham.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister, in light of the reported issues arising from proposed rural nursery closures or mothballing, including the potential impact on the sustainability of rural communities and the operation of primary schools, whether the Scottish Government will review the relevant legislation and the guidance on criteria for protecting rural primary schools.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government recognises the vital role rural schools and early years provision play in sustaining local communities. Responsibility for decisions about local provisions rests with local authorities. Any closure, temporary or permanent, should be considered in consultation with local communities. We are reviewing guidance on mothballing to provide greater clarity on whether it is an appropriate action to take. This will ensure local decisions are based on effective engagement with the community and better reflect the needs of rural families and help maintain access to early learning in these communities.
Christine Graham.
I thank the First Minister for his answer, because across Scotland and indeed in the Scottish borders, 7 rural nurseries are threatened with so-called mothballing. Many are physically attached to the primary, such as Charnelkirk and Walkerburn in my constituency, just through a doorway, so school and nursery are actually as one. Children have the same teacher, head teacher, share meal times with the primary pupils, so transition and integration is simply not an issue. They just move next door. So it's my belief, for educational and social reasons, as well as sustaining that primary school and the wider community, in these circumstances, these particular nurseries require added protection. So I'm pleased to hear what the First Minister says, and in the review of the guidance, will he consider, given what I've said, additional criteria for retaining nurseries, which actually form part of the school?
First Minister.
I think Christine Graham makes an absolutely compelling argument, because at the heart of the reforms on early learning and childcare, the Government has been working with our local authority partners to ensure that young people are able to get the best start to their early years education, and that has a natural progression into the school, in which particularly in many schools in primary 1 and in some schools in primary 2, There will still be a play-based curriculum, which has been the foundation of the early years experience for 3- and 4-year-olds and for some 2-year-olds. So that structural point that Christine Graham makes about the school is also a structural point about the curriculum as well, and the approach that we take to getting young people the best start in life. So we will reflect on the points that Christine Graham has made, because I think they are substantive considerations in making sure that we have that provision available in all communities within Scotland, which is what the Government is funding by the local authority settlement that we put in place.
Stephen Kerr.
And on the subject of the closure of rural primary schools, during the consultation process on the proposed closure of Blackness Primary School, parents accused Falkirk Council of deliberately spreading misleading information and, worse still, frightening the children in the school by telling them that their school was going to close. So would the First Minister agree with me that the Scottish Government must now step in to properly investigate how this consultation was conducted and ensure that the voices of parents and families are not just heard but respected?
First Minister.
Providing officers, there are very strict elements of legislation in place around any question of a rural school closure, and that has to be followed assiduously as part of the statutory process. Now, if Mr Kerr wishes to write to the Education Secretary with the points that he's raising in detail about the situation at Blackness School, that will be considered by the Government. I would remind Mr Kerr that local authorities are independent bodies. The Government does not control local authorities. It is for local authorities to come to their own decisions, but they must operate within the statutory provision that Parliament has determined on this question.
Thank you. Question number 5, Pam Gossel.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what impact the Scottish Government anticipates that the Supreme Court judgment regarding For Women Scotland Limited versus the Scottish Minister will have on the implementation of the public sector equality duty in Scotland.
First Minister.
So the Scottish Government accepts the Supreme Court's judgment. This Government is committed to protecting everyone's rights, including through effective implementation of the public sector equality duty. We continue to take forward a phased programme of improvement to the operation of the public sector equality duty in Scotland, and of course will consider the impact of the Supreme Court's ruling in that work. The Cabinet Secretaries for Health and Social Care and Social Justice will meet with the Equality and Human Rights Commission later today and will be seeking an update on timing of their revised guidance, which is essential to fulfilling the statutory underpinnings of the approach that we take.
Pam Gossel.
I thank the First Minister for that response. Presiding Officer, as mentioned in this chamber earlier this week, I was honoured to attend and witness the UK Supreme Court judgment which provided clarity on what a woman is. Yet some in this chamber refuse to accept it. Whilst it is now the law that biological sex trumps gender identity, self-ID remains central to the SNP government. That is the same SNP government which presided over public bodies suspending nurses for refusing to share changing rooms with biological male colleagues and allowing dangerous male prisoners to be sent to women's prisons. Public bodies need clarity. Every day of delay risks further uncertainty. So can the First Minister give me a clear answer? When will the SNP government be issuing new guidance on compliance with the Supreme Court's judgment?
First Minister.
I give Pam Gossel the assurance that we will develop that guidance in a timely manner. There is a meeting today, as I said in my opening answer, with the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, whose advice we relied upon in the previous guidance that we had in place, and whose advice and guidance we will have to rely upon in the future. And the Government will report to Parliament about the progress that has been made in that respect. But I recognise the need for us to put in place timely guidance to apply the judgment that has been arrived at by the Supreme Court.
Michelle Thompson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Public Administration section of the Finance Committee recently met with the outgoing Permanent Secretary, and it was clear from evidence to the committee that the Scottish civil servants are being subjected to internal policies that have not adhered to the public sector equality duty, with women's networks allowing men to self-identify into membership and policies being developed over private spaces where no input was sought around sex as a protected characteristic. Now, the First Minister has made clear that there's now considerable work underway, but will he personally ensure that that work puts women's voices as 57% of the Scottish civil service at the heart of these kind of policies and really make sure that the public sector equality duty is met?
First Minister.
I intend to ensure that the public sector equality duty is met, and we will act, as I have made clear to Parliament in all of my answers on this subject, within the law. Obviously, there was legal clarity given by the Supreme Court last week, and the Government has to consider the details of that ruling to enable it to be applied in taking forward the public sector equality duty.
Ash Regan.
Presiding Officer, the Court of Session ruling against Scottish Borders Council marks yet another legal failure to uphold long-standing protections for women and children, this time involving a primary school child. And it exposes this broader pattern of public bodies disregarding the Equality Act of 2010 and other regulations in place since 1967. The undue influence of activist lobby groups like LGBT Youth Scotland has led to policies breaching single-sex safeguards. All such policies must now be withdrawn. Will public funding finally be withdrawn from organisations that are wrongly advising that gender self-ID is lawful in Scotland when it never has been?
First Minister.
President Officer, throughout this whole discussion, I have made clear that the rule of law must be the central consideration of the actions of government, and that is what we will take forward in all of our judgments. I am aware of the judicial review decision that was announced by the Court of Session yesterday in relation to Scottish Borders Council. That is not a judgment that involves the Government, it involves Scottish Borders Council. But of course the Government will consider the issues that arise out of that as we consider all aspects of the reform of regulation that is required.
Douglas Ross.
This is a very straightforward question. Does the First Minister believe that a trans woman is a woman? Yes or no?
First Minister, I have set out that the Scottish Government accepts the judgment of the Supreme Court, which ruled that a woman in the Equality Act 2010 is defined by biological sex.
Thank you. Question number 6, Ariane Burgess.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister whether he will provide an update on when the Scottish Government expects to respond to the Loch Long Salmon Farm planning application.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government is giving full and proper consideration to this appeal, and every effort has been made to issue a decision as soon as possible. It would, of course, not be appropriate for me to say any more in relation to what is a live planning case.
Ariane Burgess.
The industrial salmon farm development proposed for Loch Long will scar the lost coastline and harm its wildlife. It's been opposed by the community, the local planning authority and even the industry. But we've now been waiting over a year for the government's response after the application was called in. First Minister, more than 4,000 people have written to the government asking it to protect Loch Long from this damaging development. Will the First Minister personally assure that my constituents' voices are listened to?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, as I indicated in my earlier answer, I cannot go into details on the handling of a live planning appeal. What I will say is that all relevant information will be considered by ministers in coming to a determination on this issue, and that determination will be arrived at as soon as it is practically possible to do so.
Wishart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's been more than a year since the Loch Long Salmon semi-closed containment project was called in for a decision by the Scottish Government. This length of wait for a decision from ministers could discourage investment in Scotland. It's now over a month since I last raised this in the Chamber, with no update since. Does the First Minister acknowledge that long waits for planning decisions are bad for business?
First Minister.
I certainly want to make sure that we take decisions as efficiently and as swiftly as we possibly can do, but I also have to make sure that the Government has adequate space and opportunity to consider all of the issues that are involved, and I'm quite sure Beatrice Bishop would understand the significance of that point. So the Government, beyond indicating that the issue is under consideration, there is little more I can say, given this is a live planning application. But I understand the importance of the point that Beatrice Bishop puts to me and the importance of early decision-making where practical.
Thank you. We move to general constituency questions, and I call Marie McNair.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Pension age disability payment is opening for applications across the whole of Scotland this week, replacing the UK Government's attendance allowance. Can the First Minister advise what steps the Scottish Government are taking to ensure that older people who are disabled, terminally ill or have care needs in my constituency get the money they need to help them look after themselves, stay safe and live with dignity?
First Minister.
Sir, I'm very pleased to confirm to Parliament that pension aid disability payment launched on Tuesday. This will pay up to £441 a month extra to disabled people over state pension age. We estimate it will help more than 170,000 disabled people or people living with a long-term health condition who need help looking after themselves or supervision to stay safe. This launch ensures that disabled people of all age groups in Scotland are now able to receive support from a social security system based on dignity, fairness and respect. Those principles were at the heart of the legislation that this Government brought to Parliament, and I am very pleased that we continue to apply those principles as we deliver the type of social security system that I think benefits and supports individuals in Scotland who are most in need at this particular moment.
Craig Haughey.
Michael Rankin is 12 and suffers from the degenerative condition Duchenne muscular dystrophy. He can still walk with an aid at home, but his mother does not know for how long this will continue. The First Minister will be aware of the efforts of Scottish parents seeking access to the drug Givinostat, which is used to treat the condition by holding back the progression of irreversible muscle damage. The drug has now been approved by the MHRA and can be accessed in the NHS through the Early Access Programme. It is now being prescribed in some NHS trusts in England and in Wales, but the Scottish Medicines Consortium is yet to assess its use here. In the meantime, sadly, health boards are not prescribing the drug. First Minister, for these boys, time is muscle. So will he urgently agree to meet with parents, including Nicola Rankin, to learn more about how this drug could be life-changing for boys like Michael?
First Minister.
I'm grateful to Mr Haughey for raising this important issue, and yesterday, on Tuesday, the Health Secretary met with some of the families who are involved in the efforts that Mr Haughey has drawn to the attention of Parliament. Yesterday, the Health Secretary met with 4 health boards involved in providing services to children with this condition to discuss what is needed to enable delivery of the medicine in a way that is safe, but also ensures fair and equitable access across the country at pace. So there is very active work underway to try to deliver on the expectations of Mr Haughey and his constituents. We are very sympathetic and are trying to get there as fast as we possibly can do. I think the engagement that the Health Secretary has had so far is perhaps sufficient. If there is a need to meet me personally, I will of course be happy to do so, but I assure Mr Haughey that this issue is being advanced with urgency by the Health Secretary.
I'm Duncan Glancy.
Sir. Thank you, Presiding Officer. This morning I met with families of children with additional support needs, and they have joined us in the gallery today. They've spent years fighting for the support their children need, and they represent thousands of parents across the country whose children are being failed, some of them out of education entirely. And a survey they ran found 97% said education is failing to meet their children's needs. They've engaged in every process, consultation, review and action plan. They've met ministers, responded to calls for evidence and taken their experiences all the way to this Parliament, but still they're being ignored. So can I ask the First Minister, why isn't he listening to the parents? When will he admit the Government are failing on ASN? And will he commit today, in front of the families in the gallery, to finally listen to them, take the urgent, properly resourced action their children need and deserve?
First Minister.
President, I recognise the importance of ensuring that the needs of every child are met within our education system. For some young people with additional support needs, that can be achieved within mainstream education. For others, it is not possible, and those judgments should be made on the needs and the assessed needs of every individual child. And the Government works closely with our local authority partners in delivering on these objectives, with over £1 billion being spent by local authorities in the last financial year on additional support for learning. The Government recognised, however, the significance of the demand for services in its latest budget settlement, and as part of that settlement we specifically agreed an additional £29 million in funding in the draft budget, which is to be allocated through local authorities in response to the legitimate issues that Pam Duncan-Glancy puts to me today. So I assure Pam Duncan-Glancy and those that she speaks on behalf of today of the importance that we attach to this issue. We are working with local authorities to make sure that the needs of every child are met, and that will continue to be our approach.
Jackie Dunbar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Security analysts have warned that the UK Government plans to build a network of mini-nuclear power stations across the country and have failed to adequately assess major security threats to the public. Does the First Minister share these concerns, and does he agree that rather than pursuing plans to invest in costly, slow-to-build and potentially hazardous nuclear power plants, the UK Government should be supporting investment in Scotland's huge renewable energy potential, which is far faster to build, cheaper and safer?
First Minister.
As Jackie Dunbar and as Parliament will know, the Government does not support energy production from nuclear power, and we believe that the investment that is necessary in our energy networks will be more cost-effective if invested in renewable energy. I'm reminded that Hinkley Point C, which is a new nuclear power station, is now projected to cost up to £46 billion, more than double the original cost estimate. So I think there are opportunities for us to deliver energy security for our country through a variety of interventions on renewable energy, through offshore wind, through pumped storage and through various other technologies, and that will certainly be the position adopted by the Scottish Government.
Carol Mockin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Yesterday, Chest, Heart and Stroke Scotland issued a statement on their concerns around government progress of respiratory health policy. Respiratory conditions like COPD are leading causes of death and health inequalities in Scotland. However, the Government is stagnating in its delivery of the action plan. This lack of progress in delivery, including ensuring universal access to pulmonary rehab, risks increasing inequality and the number of preventable deaths. Can I therefore ask the First Minister whether his Government will deliver on the commitments made within the plan before the end of this Parliament?
First Minister.
The Government will engage with Chest, Heart and Stroke Scotland. They're an organisation that does fantastic work in raising awareness on all of these questions. We are supporting a range of prescribing routes for COPD, and the Centre for Sustainable Delivery is working with COPD patients to develop new treatment pathways. There's a variety of different policy measures that we are taking forward, including some of the wider societal policies such as low emission zones, which are aimed to assist in improving air quality, which will be of benefit to individuals with COPD. And our Respiratory Care Action Plan sets out how we are working to improve prevention, diagnosis, care, treatment and support. But the Government will, of course, be happy to engage further with Chest, Heart and Stroke Scotland and with patients to determine what further steps we can take.
Ros McCall.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, my constituents, Scott and Olivia Lyon, recently received the heartbreaking news their 1-year-old son Blair has retinoblastoma, which is a rare type of eye cancer that affects young children, roughly about 50 children in the UK each year. Whilst it can be hereditary, it can also affect a child purely by chance. It can't be predicted or prevented, and it simply appears as a squint or a glow in the eye. Now, Scott and Olivia are determined to raise public awareness given the importance of early diagnosis. So will the First Minister join me in promoting the visibility of retinoblastoma, thanking the incredible NHS teams involved in their care across Scotland, and urge families to make an urgent appointment if they think there should be any concerns?
First Minister.
I do join Ros McCall in endorsing that approach and in welcoming the comments that she has made to Parliament today. I think the central point that Ros McCall makes about early intervention and early assessment is really important. I think some of the the fantastic work that can be done in relation to ophthalmology services is an illustration of early intervention having significant benefits as a consequence. So I very much endorse the points that Ros McCall has made. I wish her and her constituents well. I'm glad to hear that they are being well supported by the National Health Service. I would expect nothing else. And if there are, of course, any issues that arise in the course of their journey, the Health Secretary will be happy to assist in any way that he can.
Bill Kidd.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First Minister, yesterday the highly thought of Glasgow Disability Alliance issued a stark warning that hundreds of thousands of disabled Scots could lose out from Westminster's brutal welfare cuts. Last night in this Parliament, Scottish Labour MPs voted to support Westminster austerities cuts to disabled people. Can the First Minister outline how his government is supporting disabled people in my constituency and across Scotland against the backdrop of Labour's accelerated Westminster austerity?
First Minister.
Well, President, Sir, I'm deeply concerned about the cuts to sickness and disability benefits that have been announced by the United Kingdom Government. Indeed, I referred to them in my earlier answers to Anna Sawar. The changes will push 250,000 people, including 50,000 children, into poverty by the end of this decade, and it will reduce the funding that Scotland receives for devolved disability benefits. So, Parliament had an opportunity yesterday to express its firm opinion on these commitments. The Government, of course, expressed our opposition to the changes. I am staggered that Scottish Labour MSPs supported the cuts, but that tells us all we need to know, that the Labour Party is in favour of continuing austerity and inflicting damage on the population of Scotland, while this Government will stand to take actions to reduce poverty and support the population in Scotland.
Daniel Johnson.
The First Minister will have seen reports over Easter recess that Sidara Capital has been given additional time to come forward with an updated bid for the Wood Group. This is concerning for two reasons. First of all, the potential loss of HQ functions and the associated expertise from the Aberdeen headquarters. But secondly, the Wood Group is critical to our ability to deliver engineering in the North Sea, which is vital for our renewables future. It's my understanding that it's pressure on the Wood Group's lenders that have led to this situation. So can I ask, what discussions has the First Minister had directly with the Wood Group about this? And secondly, has either the Scottish Government or its agencies explored the possibility of either financial guarantees or facilities which might ease these short-term pressures and retain this vital Scottish company in Scottish ownership?
First Minister.
So these are obviously complex corporate decisions that are being arrived at. The Scottish Government will, in all of these circumstances, as we do in case of this type, offer the engagement of the Deputy First Minister and Scottish Enterprise to determine if there are any steps we can take to assist in ensuring that the legitimate points that Mr Johnson puts to me of the importance of retaining headquarters functions and the effectiveness of these organisations within Scotland, and we will engage on that basis.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a member's business debate in the name of Neil Bibby, and there will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the public gallery and the chamber to do so.
are leaving the gallery to please do so quickly and quietly to allow us to move on to the next item of business. And that is a members' business debate on motion 16978 in the name of Neil Bibby on BBC Scotland's decision to end River City and close its Dumbarton studios. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I would invite those members who would wish to speak in the debate to please press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Neil Bibby to open the debate. Up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank you to all the many members across all the political parties who have supported this motion for debate. This cross-party support shows how River City is an important part of Scotland's culture, and it is held in affection by many of our constituents. In opening, let me address directly why this motion was put forward by my colleague Jackie Baillie and I, and why it is important. Last month, BBC Scotland announced its regrettable decision to cancel River City after more than 20 years on our screens and to close its Dumbarton studios. This decision has many implications for the viewing public, for jobs and for training opportunities in Scotland's television industry. River City is Scotland's only homegrown soap. From when Bob proposed to Zara in a cherry picker, to Scarlett giving birth to Madonna in a taxi. From Raymond blowing up the Tall Ship pub, to this week's jaw-dropping episode, and I won't give any spoilers away, Presiding Officer, it has provided fans with laughs, tears and memorable moments since 2002. It has been long-running and successful too, with the show receiving a number of nominations and awards throughout the past 20 years, most recently winning Best Drama at the Royal Television Society Scotland Awards in 2023 for its 20th anniversary episode. And that's one of the many reasons why there has been real concern expressed about this decision since it was announced. But don't just take my word for it. Over 10,000 of our constituents signed a petition organised by Equity Union calling for River City to be saved within 4 days of the announcement. And an extensive list of hundreds of esteemed members of Scotland's and the UK's cultural sector also oppose the ending of the show and have called on the BBC to think again. Ewan McGregor, Blythe Duff, David Morrissey, Richard E. Grant, Robert Carlyle, Frankie Boyle, Lorraine McIntosh, Irvin Welsh and many, many more have co-signed a letter to the Cabinet Secretary calling for support to stop River City being axed. It's an understatement to say these creatives know a thing or two about the creative sector and they should be listened to. And I look forward to hearing from the Cabinet Secretary on what steps the Scottish Government can take to support their calls and challenge the BBC. The entertainment provided and the awards won by the show has been achieved on a budget of just £9 million, which in the grand scheme of things, I believe represents significant value for money. We know previously around 500,000 people would regularly watch the show. Even considering the declining trend for long-running UK TV productions, recent figures show River City still attracts around 200,000 to 285,000 viewers. This is in the context of greater competitions from streaming platforms and it being moved around its BBC One slot more than any other production. The BBC has a great product here and they should be proud of it. And I believe if it gave the show the consistent slot and the right marketing it deserves, for example by updating the out-of-date information on its website, then those viewing figures would be even higher. But the current figures still represent a sizable proportion of the Scottish public and the importance of linear television. For context, on the weekend of the 12th and the 13th of April, attendances at all Scottish Professional Football League fixtures were just under 140,000. BBC Scotland have stated they intend to protect and increase the budget for drama, and of course we would all want to see that happen. Concerns, though, have been raised that the currently planned replacements will result in 13 fewer hours of production than is currently the case. This obviously has implications for writers as well as cast and crew. And there are concerns too about ensuring this budget is fully spent in Scotland and proposals to award replacement drama programmes to London-based production companies. It is of course not the place of politicians to make editorial decisions on what is or what is not aired on public service broadcast television. But we should highlight the serious concerns on behalf of viewers and those working in the industry when necessary. Because, as I said earlier, this is more than just about the loss of a soap opera. The decision to close BBC Dumbarton Studios is also deeply regrettable. Having visited the studios recently, it is clear it is a valuable asset. It was wrongly suggested that the owner of the site did not wish to renew the lease, but as revealed by my colleague Jackie Bailey, this was not the case, and the owner of the site is still keen for the studios to remain. I was impressed by the set when I visited, and given it provides good value for money, and it would be hard and expensive to replicate, it therefore makes little sense to me to close the studios. It has multi-uses too, having been the site for other productions, including Vigil, Shetland and Two Doors Down. We also heard first-hand the importance of training opportunities it provides. All in all, 72 trainees have come through the production in the last 2.5 years alone, with the vast majority of writers and directors being women. And even when River City is not shooting, students from the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland come into the studio and get the chance to film. This gives them invaluable experience to develop in the industry. So this clearly shows it's not just an entertainment show, it is a pathway and a platform for young Scottish talent, with talent such as Sam Heughan going on to star in Outlander. I want to quote the actor Stuart Martin, who has appeared in the show, who has powerfully said, "Losing River City is devastating to an industry that is increasingly brutal to those trying to break into it, and an industry that is increasingly favouring those who can afford to do it and closing its doors to those who don't have the means. It is a necessity that River Cities of this world industry remain." Equity Union have also described this move as a blow to working class performers. Finally, in closing, Presiding Officer, it's important to acknowledge that River City has a real, tangible social value. There's been significant discussion here and elsewhere about the recent Netflix documentary show Adolescence. Television is a unique forum to explore sensitive subject matters. Throughout its run, River City has confronted difficult topics, including mental health, domestic violence and self-harm. The social value in exploring these topics cannot be overstated. The writers, producers, crew and cast of River City, many of them who are in the gallery today, have done a phenomenal job in doing that, and we should thank them for it. It's difficult to imagine another show being able to fill the void left by River City in this regard, and the BBC should think again. Often we don't fully appreciate what we have lost until it's gone. But in terms of River City and Dumbarton Studios, we've not lost them just yet. And hopefully we see a twist in this plot that means both survive into the future. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Bibby. I would say to our visitors in the gallery, you're all indeed very welcome to observe our proceedings, and as observers and not participants in our proceedings, I would ask you please to refrain from clapping or indeed any other form of involvement. Thank you very much in advance for your cooperation. With that, I call Elena Whittam to be followed by Pam Gozo. Ms Whittam.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. First, let me thank Neil Bibby for securing this debate today and bringing this important issue to the Chamber. Because we're not just talking about the cancellation of a television programme, but about the silencing of a cultural voice. A voice that's spoken to and for Scotland for over 2 decades. A voice that has spoken to those of us in the West Coast and the Central Belt in a way that rings true to our own ears and our lived experience. I cannot overstate how vitally important it is for people to see themselves reflected in the media that they consume. I learned this when studying journalism and communications in Montreal in the 1990s at university, and we were taught in the French-speaking part of Canada that authentic voices in our own language and situated in the familiar are key to cohesion and self-worth. It's definitely not a nice-to-have, but institutionally critical. The BBC's decision to cancel River City is more than just a scheduling choice. It's a cultural and an economic setback that Scotland cannot afford. I remember its debut in 2002 well, having managed to get my 3-year-old down for the night in time, and I sat down with a big cuppa and a cake of chocolate. And I must say that by the end of it, I just loved the show. My ex-husband not so much, but then he hated when I watched EastEnders or Neighbours or any of the other stories, as my granny used to call them. And since then, River City has been a vital platform for Scottish storytelling. It has brought the lives, the struggles, the humour and the heart of everyday Scots into our homes week after week. Unlike shows set in London or Manchester, River City isn't filtered through a distant lens. It's authentically Scottish. It showcases our accents, our idioms, our social issues, our humour, all within the familiar setting of fictional Shield Inch. It reflects Scotland as we see it, not as others imagine us to be. Cancelling River City sends a worrying message, and that message is that regional voices don't matter, that Scottish stories don't sell, that unless you're based in the media hubs of London, your voice is disposable. But, Deputy Presiding Officer, River City is not just a cultural icon. It's a crucial pillar of Scotland's creative economy, a pathway and a scaffolding for talent and creativity. The show employs a huge range of professionals, not just actors and writers, but camera crews, set designers, costume departments, makeup artists, and countless others who are often invisible to the audience. It offers consistent employment in an industry where work is often unpredictable. Its filming based in Dumbarton helps to support the local businesses, fosters creative talent and provides a pipeline for young Scots entering the media industry. Cancelling this show risks creating a cultural vacuum and an economic one too. We talk about levelling up, about decentralising opportunity, but how can we do that if we're cutting off the very platforms that nurture regional talent? What happens when aspiring Scottish writers see fewer avenues to tell their stories? When actors must leave Scotland to find work? When Scottish children growing up seeing fewer characters who sound like them in streets that look like theirs? This isn't just about nostalgia. This is about representation, employment and respect. This also smacks of snobbery and classism, and we must call that out. Let's support London's East End, but not Glasgow's Shield Inch. I urge the BBC and its decision makers to reconsider this choice. If River City is struggling, support it, revamp it, reinvest in it, but don't erase it. Because when we cut off the stories of a nation, we cut off its voice. And in doing so, we risk dimming the light of Scottish culture and at its source. Deputy Presiding Officer, let's not allow that to happen. The BBC must think again.
Thank you, Ms Whittam. I now call Pam Gozo to be followed by Jackie Bailey. Ms Gozo.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Before I begin my speech, I would like to thank Neil Bibby for bringing this very important issue to the Chamber. For over 2 decades, the BBC River City has been entertaining households in Scotland, which each episode reaching an estimated audience of 500,000 people, outperforming other series by more than 2.5 times. River City is Scotland's only homegrown soap opera, and its creator, Stephen Greenhorn, wished to create a series which would do for Scotland what legendary TV series such as Coronation Street and EastEnders have done for England. River City enjoys high ratings and has won multiple awards, including most recently the Best Drama at the Royal Television Society Scotland 2023 Awards for its 20th anniversary episode. The annual budget for River City is reported at £9 million, which, as Neil Bibby's motion states, is excellent value for money. While we as audience members will be sad to miss such a great television programme, the consequences will be even more devastating for those working on the production. This is especially important for the west of Scotland, as River City is and has been a great job creator for my region of Dumbarton. Each episode employs many people, including not just actors, writers, producers and camera and sound crews, but also costume designers, wardrobe assistants, makeup artists, set builders and many more. Before Easter recess, I was proud to sign Equity's Save River City campaign to save the show and jobs. In 2023, I was privileged to visit the set of the series during filming and met with some of the cast members, including the lead actor Stephen Purdon. During my visit, I was told that 250 people worked on the site in various roles, including 70 trainees and 3 apprentices who had the opportunity for long-term training. I was pleased to hear how many of these people were local, varying from low, medium to higher skilled jobs. Like others, I was disappointed that the BBC Scotland failed to inform the Scottish Parliament's Constitution, Europe and External Affairs and Culture Committee of its plans to end River City. and to close its Dumbarton studios in its annual report presented to the committee earlier this year. That is why it should be up to the BBC Scotland to explain how its current proposals will ensure that the skills and jobs, including apprenticeships, are not lost and whether or not more productions are on the line. In closing, Presiding Officer, I hope that MSPs can come together this afternoon and call on the BBC Scotland to reconsider their decision and to save River City.
Thank you, Ms Gozo. I now call Jackie Bailey to be followed by Patrick Harvey. Ms Bailey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I too want to thank Neil Bibby for bringing this important debate to Parliament and for his support for River City, and welcome many members of the cast to the Chamber this afternoon. Now, when River City was first launched in 2002, no one took its success for granted. I was very proud, though, that Shieldinch was being filmed in Dumbarton. But 23 years later, more than 11,000 people have signed a petition to save it. That is testament to the work of countless writers, actors and producers who have turned it into an iconic part of Scotland's TV landscape. Scottish content for Scottish audiences made right here in Scotland. Because from the start, everyone involved in River City was clear that this was more than just a show. As Ken Macquarie, BBC Scotland's head of programming, said at the time, what we are effectively doing here is developing a star factory, a long-running project that gives a boost to the wealth of talent that we've got here in Scotland. And how right he was. Eric Barlow, who played Tommy Donachie, went on to star in Taggart, Monarch of the Glen, Casualty and Doctors. Gary Lamont, who played Robbie Fraser, recently featured in the hit series Boiling Point and Rivals. Sam Hugan, now the internationally recognised star of Outlander, described his time on the show as incredible. And Renton's own Gail Telfer Stevens, making waves in comedy as well as playing Caitlin McLean. And there from the beginning, Shell Suit Bob, listening in the gallery alongside many other members of the cast. And I have to say that Bob O'Hara is so much part of Scottish culture that we almost made a request for a gallery ticket in his TV name. But it's not just about the actors. River City has also created opportunities for screenwriters, set designers, producers, film crews and others in the Scottish TV and film industry. Not to mention the jobs that come with cleaning, maintaining and catering for a busy film studio. Now, in the past 2 years, 23 screenwriters got their first screen credit on River City, while over a similar period, 5 out of 6 trainee directors were women. This wouldn't have happened without River City. This is a training pipeline for the creative industry, unlike anything anywhere else in the BBC. And there's been lots of talk from the BBC about training going into the future. But there's been nothing on the scale of River City, and there is nothing that they are proposing that will match it. So let's be honest. What we're talking about is not just the closure of River City. We're not just talking about the gap in the TV schedule, important though that is to hundreds of thousands of Scots who tune in each week. We're also talking about a fundamental blow to Scotland's TV and film infrastructure, about freelancers who may decide to move to Manchester or London. And the BBC says it will replace the soap with network drama. But flying in crews to occasionally film in a Scottish castle is no substitute for a homegrown industry. Closing the Dumbarton studios, where programmes like Vigil and Shetland were filmed, is also short-sighted. So what are the BBC's network plans on drama production in Scotland for the next few years? Is the share of Scottish-produced content now going to fall? Or will it be simply lift and shift drama from another part of the UK? Well, I have to say, I fear the worst. Staff were led to believe that River City was closing because the site owners were selling up. But that is simply untrue. No one denies that there are challenges, but time and again, River City has adapted despite the BBC changing its programme slot and despite switching it to the BBC Scotland channel as well. The BBC has a choice: and I hope it will not be short-sighted. I hope it will reverse its decision to leave the Dumbarton studios, and I hope that the Cabinet Secretary and all members in this chamber will encourage the BBC to make the same decision that they did in 2002, invest in Scotland's talent, invest in River City.
Thank you, Ms Bailey. I now call Patrick Harvey to be followed by George Adam. Mr Harvey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And as a Dumbarton expat, I'm obviously going to agree with Jackie Bailey about the comment she made about the value of having the creative industries in the town. But I want to thank Neil Bibby for bringing this motion, and it's one that I think should be of importance to everybody, regardless of whether you're a fan of the programme. With deep apologies to our guests, I'm going to freely confess that my TV habits involve rather more spaceships and aliens than we normally see in episodes of River City. I make no apology for that. But I do want the screen sector to be thriving in Scotland, including, as we heard earlier, the critically important issue of telling distinctively Scottish stories, which the big streamers are not necessarily going to fund. And we're only going to have that if we have the ecosystem that makes it possible, and those opportunities for people to get started in their careers. I want to express my sincere thanks to the cast and crew for welcoming me and my colleague Gillian Mackay to a visit recently. And what we saw, I think, for me, was twofold. First of all, the incredible pride that the whole team take in their work, and they're right to take that pride. We've heard a lot about the training work that's been done. I had to say, training work that's not always been done because the BBC told them to do it, but actually sometimes despite the BBC's expectations, and then the team get the credit afterwards. But those huge number of range, from electricians to makeup, costume and props professionals, camera trainees, script editors. I'm not going to list the whole thing. We all know the incredible work that they've done on an inclusive approach to the role that they can have on training. In many ways, soaps like River City and a number of other productions, ongoing productions, do for television and the screen sector what in previous generations weekly rep theatre might have done for the stage. They create those opportunities for people to get their first break. And many of the people that I met don't only work on River City, they spend part of the year working on other productions as well. But I endorse the comment from the hundreds of industry professionals who've added their names to a petition. One writer wrote, "My concern is for those coming along behind me. What about their opportunities, their careers, their finances, their futures, that of their families? What will happen to their break, their lifeline, their support, their welcome to the world of TV drama, which I received?" And that, I think, is what is not going to be replaced by a few individual six-part drama. Even if significant investment goes into those one-off six-part dramas that fits better with the streaming model, with the way television is changing, I'm sure there will be positive value that comes out of that and opportunities for some people to get a job. But it won't provide that ecosystem, that basic level of first and second and third job opportunities that River City has such a strong track record of providing, and which the entire industry depends on. The future even of the folk I met at River City know that they're not working on the highest end, highest value production. They're proud of what they do because of the role that it provides in supporting the entire rest of the industry. And the high-end productions depend on that throughput of talent coming through generation after generation. And that's one of the things that River City does. The second thing, very briefly, Presiding Officer, that I saw from the people that I met was they recognise the industry is changing. And they're not suggesting that everything should be preserved in aspect the way it is. They recognise the industry is changing with that move away from linear television, with the role of the streamers and with the costs of production. But what they want is to be able to continue to ensure that those training and first and second and third job opportunities are there, not just exactly in the way that are happening right now, but for the future of the industry. And, Presiding Officer, that is what I don't see in the BBC's proposals for what is to come after this. So I don't believe that the BBC has offered either an appropriate off-ramp for a model if they want to change it, or the opportunities for the current team working on River City and for the next and the next and the next generation of people who need their foothold in the industry, because that's what we need if the Scottish screen sector more generally is to thrive.
Thank you, Mr Harvey. And I now call George Adam to be followed by Pam Duncan-Glancy. Mr Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I thank Neil Bibby for bringing this debate to Parliament today. Initially, I wasn't going to speak in this debate, but after speaking to Mr Bibby when we were at the Culture Committee today, I managed to get myself into a bit of a rage about what's happening here. So I've managed that just down to a wee bit of a rammy at the stage at the moment. But I think one of the things, there is a snobbery when it comes to soap operas in general within our cultural landscape, and particularly with River City, because River City speaks in my voice. And that same snobbery can actually be in this place as well, because I have been kind of criticised by members of the public for the way I speak in Parliament. But this is my voice, and this is the way I speak, and it's the way my community speaks. And that's what's important about a show like River City. Let's not forget that that's Scotland's voice and the many different communities that we have there. And I'm not speaking about River City here in the past tense, because it's still, right now at this moment, filming, it's still telling our stories, and it's still giving a platform to Scottish voices and Scottish talent. And we're told that in 2026 all of that is going to come to an end. And my question, Presiding Officer, is why? River City has been a constant on our screens for over 2 decades, a Scottish production made in Scotland by Scottish crews with Scottish actors, and it's rooted in the rhythms of our lives, our culture and our humour. And it mirrors the people of Scotland as well. Now, that might be quite concerning when you look at some of the stories, right enough, but it doesn't get the credit for the important part it plays in our cultural landscape. Now the BBC says it's time to wind it up. They say viewing habits have changed, and maybe they have. People are streaming, they are binge-watching, skipping adverts, although currently not in the BBC. But I get that. But the question I'm asking is, if River City is to go, where and what are we replacing it with? Where are our stories going to be told? Where are our actors, writers and crews going to go? This debate is about jobs, skilled jobs. Ongoing employment for production staff, set designers, costume departments and, of course, the actors and writers who have built careers on this show. It's about opportunity. It's about keeping our creative talent here in Scotland instead of forcing them to head south or abroad for work. Paul W. Fleming, General Secretary Equity, said axing River City would have a devastating effect on acting and production roles for Scottish talent. And that's a worry. The BBC says it wants to invest in new drama across Scotland and shorter series, and that would be welcome, but shorter-run series don't offer the same continuity of employment, the same training ground, or the same cultural resonance that a long-running show like River City does. This isn't a simple matter of changing the format. This is a fundamental shift away from rooted, community-based storytelling. Presiding Officer, River City is still here, and that means there's still time. Time for the BBC to reconsider, time for us to speak up, time for us to stand by a production that has done more for the Scottish culture and the creative economy than we give it credit for. Because when River City goes, it won't just be a drama that disappears, it will be another Scottish voice lost from the national conversation. Yes, I will.
Clare Adamson.
I thank Mr Adam for taking that intervention. With everything he has said, I absolutely agree about this aspect of snobbery. I once attended a talk by Sergio Caschi, who had not only a BAFTA and Palme d'Or nominee. His favourite line he wrote for River City was delivered by Scarlett, I believe, which is, "This place smells like a bus of wet students." But Sergio, he started his career again on River City, and is it not absolutely clear to everyone that the talent and the people that are producing and working on River City are world class, and that we shouldn't judge their contribution to Scotland's film and TV industry as anything other than being a first-class production.
George Adam.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly with that, because the whole point of that is, with a long-running drama like River City, you have the opportunity to develop that talent further, give people second chances, because we all know that not everyone gets their first chance and is successful within the creative industry. So you give people that ability to actually develop their talent further and move on. But it's also important that we still have that conversation. We still have that voice, that Scottish voice, where we can actually see our lives in television. And that's important, and it's something I keep going on about, and it's something this Parliament should go on about. So I ask myself, Presiding Officer, what's BBC Scotland's long-term plan? What's their end game in this? Is this just another cut of Scottish talent, of Scottish TV programming, or is there any real commitment to Scottish storytelling? Let's not allow River City to quietly be written out of our cultural future. Let's fight for the stories, the voices, and the people who make Scotland's creative life vibrant and visible.
Thank you, Mr Adam. And I now call Pam Duncan-Glancy, who will be the last speaker before I ask the Cabinet Secretary to respond to the debate. Ms Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And I want to begin my contribution, as others have, by thanking my colleague Neil Bibby for bringing this important debate to the Chamber and for his tireless work standing up for Scotland's cultural sector. I'd also like to thank Equity, the union, for working closely with us to highlight the impact of this decision and for working day in, day out for their members and for the rights of workers. The decision to end River City is a blow for fans of the show and has wide-ranging consequences for many who worked on it: the actors, the crew, the producers, the educators and, most of all, the young people and early career professionals who stand to benefit from the opportunities that River City could provide in the future. Because, make no mistake, this is not just about one television programme, and it's not just about one studio. This is also about opportunity. It's about the very infrastructure relied on to train and support the next generation of talent in Scotland's creative industries. River City is one of the only year-round, high-volume production environments in the country. It offers stable work. It offers training, on-the-job opportunities, and work on it is a crucial part of the college and university offer in the creative industries across Scotland. Crucially, Deputy Presiding Officer, it offers access especially for people who don't easily access the creative industries, those who don't have the networks or resources to break into the industry on their own. Women, disabled creatives and early career creatives, to name a few. Since the decision to do this has been announced, I've heard from various educational institutions across Scotland about how crucial it is to learning and teaching in their creative courses. Glasgow Caledonian University's MA in Television Fiction Writing, the only course of its kind in the UK, has for years relied on its relationship with River City to give students their first professional credits. Dozens of graduates have gone on directly into jobs on the show. At the University of St Andrews, their MA in Playwriting and Screenwriting was on the brink of forming a partnership with the production team, with the aim of giving students experience in a working story room, something that wouldn't exist anywhere else in Scotland at this scale. The Theatre School of Scotland has provided testimony that speaks for so many, that River City offers a rare chance for young actors to see themselves on screen and take their first steps into the industry. And what do all of these have in common? They all speak to the same thing, that River City is more than a programme. It is a platform, and as the head of programming in the BBC then called it, and Jackie Bailey has referenced this already today, a star factory. Its closure would leave a vacuum that we're not currently prepared yet to fill. The BBC has suggested that it will make space for new projects and build on the work of the River City Academy. But it is, Presiding Officer, very hard to see how this can be replicated without the presence, scale or permanence that River City provides. It's crucial that a strategy to ensuring that the training, skills and access to work pipeline that it provides is protected. It's also crucial that decisions are taken in consultation with this Parliament, with the sector, with creatives themselves, with trade unions and the institutions that now find themselves scrambling to adjust to the potential consequences if the decision goes ahead. Presiding Officer, this is simply not good enough. The screen industry in Scotland is a sector of national importance. It's a driver of jobs, of creativity, of education, of opportunity and of our national identity. And that future cannot be delivered without the investment in River City and the skills it offers, the proper infrastructure that comes with it. Without that, there will be a vacuum. And without due regard to the people or places and the institutions that are affected, we can't fully appreciate the impact of this decision. So today, like others, I ask the BBC to change its mind, to do what it has so far refused to do as well, to reconsider this decision, to provide clarity on the decision-making, to engage with the Parliament and with stakeholders, and to bring forward a renewed decision or a credible plan. And I am asking the Scottish Government to take this seriously today, to support our educators, to work with the industry and to use the powers and influence it has to prevent River City from ending, because the decision has not yet taken fully place. We can save the show, and I urge the Government to take everything they can do to make sure that happens. Presiding Officer, this is not irreversible. I believe we can act. And we have to do so with urgency, with purpose and with a clear commitment to the future of Scotland's creative economy. Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Duncan Clancy. And I now call on Angus Robertson, Cabinet Secretary, to respond to the debate. Around 7 minutes, please.
Presiding Officer, I'm pleased to be able to respond on behalf of the Scottish Government on this important debate, and I thank Neil Bibby for raising this motion and pay tribute to the River City cast and crew, many of whom are with us here today, as well as to Equity to the Writers Guild, who have provided such strong representation in recent weeks on this subject. It's more than regrettable that the BBC has taken the decision regarding the only production of this kind from Scotland, and I'm deeply disappointed that we continue to see a worrying trend in decision-making that runs counter to the BBC's own commitment to invest in the nations and to improve representation. Scottish Government could not be clearer. We expect the BBC to be doing more for our audiences and for our creative industries, to develop skills and training opportunities, to support quality jobs, to create high-quality programmes in Scotland, and to serve Scotland's diverse audiences equitably. As the many strong contributions that we've heard today emphasise, this is a critical discussion, and we must take the time to acknowledge the vital role that a production like River City has for our creative economy and to the many talented individuals that work on it. While editorial decision-making, of course, sits with the BBC, it's right that we speak out and urge against decisions that impact on services, on skills, development and on jobs in Scotland. And the BBC is accountable to Scottish audiences, and it should be delivering a service that meets the needs here in Scotland. When I recently met with the BBC Scotland Director, I was clear that investment, skills and jobs opportunities must remain in Scotland, and we expect to see these increase. This is particularly important given the historic imbalance that has existed in terms of the proportion of licence fee income raised in Scotland being spent here. And I've also recently met with Ofcom to discuss wider production in Scotland and urge the regulator to ensure that the BBC is meeting its obligations in delivering for viewers and for Scotland's creative professionals. As many members have highlighted today, people working in Scotland's screen sector must continue to access meaningful career and skills development opportunities, as they have been able to do through River City's Training Academy. River City has been an important kickstarter for many careers, and it's vital that the BBC considers how it will continue to ensure that people can develop successful careers in Scotland. I will continue to press the BBC to deliver increasing opportunities for people in Scotland, as well as continue the positive diversity of inclusion work that River City has supported. And on the matter of talent development and Scottish-originated production growth, Screen Scotland is also closely engaging with the BBC, including through their MOU, to enable more new original content being made and Scottish-based talent being developed. I'd like to take the opportunity to highlight the BBC Charter and the upcoming review. The Charter is essential in delivering the BBC's public service remit, of which supporting the creative economies in the nations is a key purpose. The Scottish Government's powers to bring about change in broadcasting policy are limited. However, we will do everything that we can to press the BBC to strengthen its investment and ensure that decision-making is not adversely impacted on the crucial public purpose. As I touch, I'd be happy to give way.
Patrick Harvey.
I'm grateful, and the Cabinet Secretary is right to put some of this in the context of the Charter renewal, because one of the things that has changed and is not going to go back to the way it was is that at the beginning of the era of BBC, the licence fee-funded public service broadcasting dominated production. Now production is dominated by commercial models, including the big streamers, and they are not funding the infrastructure and the ecosystem in the way that the BBC used to. So does the Scottish Government support the idea of a levy on the streamers so that we have revenue funds to invest in productions, whether by the BBC or anyone else, that create that ecosystem and can sustain what the BBC at the moment doesn't want to sustain?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I'm open to looking at all avenues that would support the growth and the retention of the screen sector in Scotland, and that includes a proposal that he has made. I think it's also important to put on record that the rules that have existed in relation to screen production in Scotland clearly have been breached. Most certainly when it comes to the spirit, if not the letter, of the rules in terms of production in Scotland. And frankly, the BBC is being watched very closely by what it does, and this will form part of our approach to charter renewal. And I just make the point, normal countries decide broadcasting policy. We don't do that in Scotland. Broadcasting policy is reserved to Westminster. Would we be having this debate as we are having this afternoon if broadcasting was a power that the Scottish Parliament could exert direct influence over? I think not. So that's also something we should reflect on, because it doesn't need to be so. I believe this Parliament should be in charge of Scotland's broadcasting policy. As I touched on earlier, the Scottish Government has been critical of the level of BBC spend in Scotland, and while we have seen improvement, it is an issue that we remain seized of and we expect to see covered in the Charter review. We also expect continued and more effective efforts from the BBC to move commissioning power to Scotland to ensure that more Scottish-originated productions are able to showcase the incredible talent that we have in Scotland. Improved equity, diversity and inclusion, as well as authentic representation, are best delivered by commissioning content from within Scotland. And the Scottish Government will continue to make these views clear in our engagement with the BBC, with Ofcom and with the UK Government, including with regard to the forthcoming Charter review. And in order to strengthen delivery of services for audiences and support for the creative sector in Scotland. Having sustainable jobs and production businesses based in Scotland is essential to maintaining and developing a strong, a sustainable, a growing Scottish screen sector, which the Scottish Government is committed to growing to reach £1 billion in gross value added by 2030. Returning to the motion, I reiterate my regret that the BBC has taken this decision and that we continue to see a number of challenges to the rebalancing of public service broadcasting in relation to Scotland. The Scottish Government does not believe that audiences and our creative sector are currently being adequately served, and our view is that it is unsustainable that broadcasting remains reserved to Westminster. We've long argued that broadcasting policy should be devolved to ensure that we can take the right decisions for our creative economy and for Scottish viewers and listeners. The cumulative effect of decisions taken on broadcasting services in Scotland, which have weakened perceptions and trust in the BBC, and the benefits that we expect for audiences and the creative industries, only strengthens my view that its future would be safer in our hands. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, I'd like to close this debate by thanking members and everyone who has shared their views with me and engaging with the Scottish Government on this important matter. There is clearly an abundance of passion and support for River City and the opportunities that this kind of production brings to our creative sector. I've been clear to the BBC that they must protect and increase its investment in Scotland and enhance the network of professionals who contribute to its productions, like River City. I expect the BBC to fully and fairly represent all communities in Scotland, and I'll continue to advocate on behalf of licence fee payers to ensure that the Scottish industry and audiences are properly represented. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes the debate, and I suspend this meeting until 2:30 p.m. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McMillan.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stuart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.